All right, guys, we're back with the 2001 Honda S2000, and as you can probably see, this thing has some meatier tires on it today. We are in winter mode, and this is actually a set of tires that I had on the BRZ last season. They're the 205 60 R16 Michelin X Ice Snows. A really nice winter tire. They handle well, they're kind of fun to drive on. They offer a little bit more sidewall. They're not the exact right size for the S2000, in keeping with my skinny, tall sidewall set up here straight from the BRZ. This S2000 is just getting all the secondhand tires from my 2022 Subaru BRZ. That's okay, it seems to handle pretty well on these tires so far. You're gonna be getting some first driving impressions today. I've pretty much only driven this about a mile here. So wanted to give you guys some updates on this car, take it for a drive. Had some issues with this a couple weeks ago. I tried to take this to a track day at Gingerman Raceway, and 10 miles from the track, the idler pulley failed. So I couldn't quite get the right part from a local parts store, couldn't do a roadside repair. So this actually had to spend 2 weeks at a shop waiting for parts from Honda to get this back on the road. You can see a new tensioner pulley and idler pulley there. It just seized, too much heat, too much age, and that was it. So this thing's running like a top now. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. Hopefully serves us for many more miles. I actually got some maintenance history on this S2000 from the previous and original owner. A lot of stuff has been replaced on this car. This has a lot of new parts. New radiator, newer suspension. Of course, we did all of the valve spring retainers and keepers to make this AP1 motor just a little bit more reliable for the track. Sadly, we just weren't able to get this out on the track this year. So we'll have to have some fun sliding it around on these snow tires. One more note before we get going, kind of a safety briefing, I guess. If you're ever having some work done on your S2000 with a tire shop or a shop that's maybe not as familiar with these cars, this is a staggered wheel setup. So these are 16 by 7.5s in the rear and 16 by 6.5s in the front. And Honda designed this car so that you couldn't put the rear wheels on the front. There's actually a different hub bore. I believe the rears are around 65 millimeters and the front's around 70 millimeters hub bore. The shop that I went to, I'm not going to name them, but they attempted to put, well, they did put one of the rear wheels on the front passenger side. And it's very, very clear, very obvious that that wheel doesn't fit over the hub, but they got it on there anyway. They tightened it down, and you can see it caused a little bit of scoring here on the rotor. Nothing major, but if I would have driven on it longer, it probably would have fallen off and caused a lot of damage. Could have been a very bad situation. It was very dangerous. Luckily, I kind of figured out what was going on very quickly after driving the car off the shop's lot, swapped everything back to where it belonged, and then had the tires flipped. But it's something to note, something to mention to people who are working on your S2000 if you're not doing the work yourself or you're not able to do the work yourself, just so that any safety issues don't arise. So anyway, on that note, let's go out and attempt to drive this car safely on wet roads on a set of skinnier winter tires and see if it's any fun. We have some improvements planned for the S2000 this winter. I have a brand new, well, not a brand new, a new used steering wheel that looks a lot better than this old thing sitting in my garage. I'm going to swap that out soon. And I just ordered a new kind of gauge cluster surround here. So hopefully that'll kind of refresh some of these buttons. They'll look a little bit nicer. These are literally flaking off. They're looking pretty rough. The seats, might get these addressed, might get these fixed with a buddy. They don't bother me as much as the gauge cluster and this super scratched up lens. So I ordered a new one of those from I think it's S2000cluster.com or something, 150 bucks. So excited to get that on there and kind of freshen up this interior a little bit. I did bleed the clutch on this car and noticed that it's a little bit easier to drive now. We still have a little bit of clutch buzz at lower RPMs, but for the most part, idler pulley failure aside, this thing drives like a champ. Also, the heater. Oh my gosh, the heater works so well in these cars. We just did a coolant bleed and flush in this, and doing the whole burping scenario is a little bit complicated, but once we got it, this thing blows so hot. It's amazing, and it just kind of envelops you with warm air. You've got vents on both sides of the steering wheel warming your hands, and if you put it in this mode right here, it just goes through every vent. Down here at the shifter, warms your legs and feet. It's great. So actually, as a comfortable sports car to drive in the wintertime, it's kind of nice. The only negative that I found is that this thing's just kind of miserable to drive with the top up. There's a lot of rattles, a lot of road noise. These window seals don't quite seal perfectly just because of the age of this car. This did spend a lot of time sitting outside, as you can tell with some of the interior wear and the repaint on the outside, but that's okay. That's why we're driving in the snow this winter. We're having a little bit of fun with this. This is not a garage queen, and I love it for that. Also planning on doing some exhaust work here with MRT here in Plymouth. Gonna be doing the UK mod, which is basically a bypass at the rear mufflers. Supposedly doesn't introduce any drone, should sound pretty nice and give this car just a little bit more volume without being obnoxious. Won't take out any weight, will actually add a little bit of weight, but I think this car deserves an exhaust to kind of match that intake and induction noise. Actually, feels really good on these winter tires. Breakaway is progressive and linear. They ride really nice with all the extra sidewall on here. What a screamer. I love this thing. It's a little rough around the edges, but it's so raw, so involving. Actually, all the rattles that I've been experiencing this week seem to have gone away. All right, so cruising on the highway here on these Michelin X Ices, a bit of a departure, a bit of a polar opposite from the Bridgestone RE71 RS tires I had on here all summer. A little bit squishier, a little bit softer. They're kind of following the grooves of the road a bit more, but it's a very comfortable tire. Not a lot of noise for a winter. We're about to pass on to asphalt from this concrete surface, and we'll see what it sounds like with tread noise. Doesn't sound any different. Awesome. You gotta love these Michelin X Ice snows. It's a really good winter tire. We're supposed to be getting some warmer weather these next couple weeks in Michigan, maybe a little bit of sun. Honestly, if it's over 40, 45 degrees, I'm gonna be putting the top down in this car, blasting the heat, and enjoying this thing with the roof down, because I think part of the fun of these cars is just driving them as convertibles, and I don't care if I look like a complete idiot doing it. Braking performance, that's ABS right there. Not bad. I'm so happy that diff still works. Oh, what a fun little thing. There's VTEC. chassis is so well balanced, so neutral. I actually really like the way this handles on a skinny square setup. It's not as snappy, it's very predictable because there is a little bit less grip. You can kind of just work with the car and play with that breakaway point. Sometimes I've found that on cars with staggered setups with a significantly wider tire on the rear, snap oversteer is even more of an issue, even though there's more overall grip. That snap and that moment of inertia can become more dramatic than if you were on a square setup of tires. We'll spare the S2000 dirt road driving. We'll leave that to the BRZ with all of its fresh suspension components and bushings. I am excited to get this out in the snow though. Oh man, it's gonna be so much fun. Just got a new pair of boots. You'll have to excuse some of my downshifts. They're not as good as they usually are. I'm still adjusting. Something rattling around back there. I love the steering here. It's so good for an electronic rack. Very excited to get that fresher AP1 steering wheel back on here too. This just is kind of gross, honestly. I am all for patina and for cars that have a history and a story, but I am excited to freshen this one up a little bit. There's something cool about having an older car that needs just a little bit of work, a little bit of love. I've really enjoyed owning my new BRZ and the Type R, but they don't really need anything. They're kind of perfect. There's little improvements, little changes, little things you can do to it that make incremental improvements and make it drive a little bit better, feel a little bit fresher, feel a bit nicer, a bit more fun, a bit more reliable. And having a car that you can tinker with and improve over time can either be a miserable or slightly enjoyable experience. And if you're afflicted with a car bug, like I'm sure a lot of the viewers on this channel are, and it is a lot of fun. Hard on the brakes, turning in. Pretty impressed with the wet performance on these tires, actually. I have no idea what pressures are at right now. I did not check them after the shop fixed everything. But they feel great. This car just loves to be driven. The more time I've spent in it, the more it just kind of feels happy. It needed an Italian tune-up. We're going to take this a bit gingerly here. I did do quite a bit of miles in this car on the way to the track before it broke down, and then after it broke down and got fixed. And I've got to say, the wind noise is kind of brutal, but besides that, this is a really comfortable car to spend time in. These seats are just fantastic. Even with rips and holes and lack of bolstering on this side, they're really comfortable on long journeys. I love these stock S2000 seats. They're pretty supportive, and they're great. Too bad they're kind of expensive to replace, and they do have some issues with sun and heat. But I should be able to get these freshened up. And the suspension, the ride quality in this AP1, even though this does have that stiffer spring rate in the rear, it's not bad on the highway. It doesn't beat you up. It's not punishing. It's just that the noise with this convertible top it does get to you. And I probably got to replace some seals here at some point. Honestly, if I hold on to this long term, I'll probably just end up replacing the whole top someday, because there are a few spots that are getting kind of thin. I've put some Gorilla tape on some friction points, but who knows how long that'll last. For me though, this car is a really good around town runabout. It's super fun to take out for a blast. This is the only other car that I've ever owned besides my NA8 Miata that I've just taken out for a drive for the heck of it on a regular basis. It's just so much fun. It's not something that I want to spend all day in. It's not something that I want to road trip. I don't want to daily drive this, but as a fun car and as a fizzy, enjoyable, visceral experience, S2000 is hard to beat. No idea what type of fuel economy this thing is getting. Actually didn't run the calculations after refilling the tank. We'll get that done at some point. I assume it's in the low to mid 20s. As a winter tire, this is great. Much better wet performance than a Blizzak. It's still compromised in the wet versus an all season, but still it's quite a good all-rounder. And in the snow and ice, almost unstoppable. It's not something that you can push hard around corners in the wet, but in the dry, this should have pretty good mechanical grip. This is actually driving a lot better than I thought it would on these tires, and I think this is going to be a fun winter car. Don't drive your S2000 in the winter and through the salt and snow, unless if you're getting it rust-proofed. I always go to Crown Rust Control. Here in Michigan, there's quite a few locations. There are lots of oil-based coatings out there. Wherever you are in the country, use one of them, use one of those services. Get your S2000 coated before it rusts. Who needs rear wheel steer when you have a limited slip diff in the back and some big squishy winter tires to burn off? Oh man, so much fun. Might swap the OEM pads back on here. These track pads are a little bit aggressive for the street. Wasn't quite sure what to think about this car when we got it. It was a little rough around the edges. Looking at the maintenance history though recently and figuring out some of the issues that it's had, I think it's a pretty mechanically solid car. Knock on wood, knock on whatever. I'd like to hold on to it and freshen it up a little bit, maybe do a bit of a paint correction. The goal here was kind of to do this on the cheap, keep it a budget build, not go crazy with anything, make it track worthy. But if I'm being honest, this is probably just going to be a street car at the end of the day. I might take it out to a track day here and there, but this isn't going to be a hardcore track S2000. It is a lot of fun to drive on the street, but it is older, and I don't know, I think I want to give this a little bit of mechanical sympathy. Anyway, we'll give you guys some more updates on the S2000 here this winter, hopefully with some snow and with a fresher steering wheel and maybe some better dash gauge appearance. Really want to get this lens replaced. This cluster is just so scratched up, and it seems to be a pretty common thing with S2000s that, you know, maybe haven't been cared for with microfiber cloths. There's even like a little bit of a break right there. Like, it's just a mess. I think it's a pretty easy swap. Some good documentation online on how to do that. So we'll come back to you guys later on with another video, hopefully in the snow, and we'll see you then. Thanks so much for watching. This was a fun drive. Hope you guys enjoyed it too. We'll see you later. I'm just gonna leave it running because I'm gonna still go drive this. Oh yeah, and exhaust work too. Can't forget about that. I did have to add about a quart of oil to this the other day. Every 2 or 3 fill-ups, I'm going to kind of be keeping an eye on the oil level with this S2000. It does burn a little bit of oil. Pretty common for these AP1s to go through a quart every few tanks.